Sup, Chuckle Fucks? It's your boy, Dark Raikou here with What If Issei Was the Reincarnation of Dabi, Part 2. Now, before I continue on, I am going to do also Part 3 of What If Issei Was the Son of a Demon Lord. Now, before I continue that on, and, well, before I actually go record that, record this one. Now, I recorded this yesterday for only like 12 minutes, and I decided not to upload it because I was mumbling, jumbling. I was half asleep. I don't know why I started recording. Anyway, I thought I could at least do it for like 20 minutes, and I was just mumbling, jumbling. I'm like, okay, fuck it. I should stop. So yeah, I did not upload it, even though maybe I should have. Not really. Fuck it. But not the point. Let me begin into this. What if? Let me shut the fuck up. No recaps because it has been 1 month. I'm also going to just be kind of recording mostly on my first channel for right now. I'll upload these 2 what ifs, and then I'll go on to my first channel so I can just start uploading there and getting money. No, just kidding. But I mean, yes, but not the point. That, and I have to finish a lot of what ifs that I really haven't finished. I'm an idiot, but not the point. Let me begin into this what if. Let me shut the fuck up and let me just begin. I should also mention that I was having a fucking killer headache in the morning. That's why I couldn't really record in the morning. Even though it was a good time to start recording, I was having a killer headache. Blah, I don't know. Yeah, pretty much my head was hurting like a bitch, so I didn't record. But I also should have said something like, it's fucking freezing cold where I'm living. Literally, I think it's already like 18 degrees here. Oof. Fuck this state. Seriously. Why does it get hot on one day and cold in the other day? What the fuck? It's not even supposed to be. It's almost February and it's so cold. Fuck this state. Not the point. Let me just begin into what if. I know I'm rambling on blah blah blah. You should probably not care about my state, where I live, or anything. Because I would never say it. Ever. I don't care if someone asks me. No, I'm not answering your damn question. Not the point. I'm rambling on. God damn it. Whatever. Let's begin. But of course, we begin into mostly a bedroom. Of course, this is where 2 people are sleeping, and of course, this is where a red magic circle appears. Well, appears in another room, realizing that her friend isn't here, but senses where she might be at, decides to teleport to that room. This is where, 2 people kind of wake up, or mostly just one person. This is where, that one person has black hair. And of course, he has his tealish bluish eyes, opening his eyes straight for a magic circle to appear. It's red, and it literally a red-haired girl kind of appear, with her greenish, tealish blue eyes. This is where, he has no shirt right now on, and of course, when this girl kind of looks out of, from the magic circle to appear, she kind of says, Issei? This is where she kind of blushes because she kind of sees Issei without a shirt, even though she has seen, Issei without a shirt, sometimes because of Azia healing his wounds, and mostly his burnt flesh, but yeah. But this is where, Issei said, what are you doing in my room? This is where, Ria says, I was looking for Akano. This is where Akano kind of wakes up next to Issei. This is where Issei says, what the fuck? How the hell did you get into my room? This is where Issei's face is a little tintish of red. Just confused because, first of all, he didn't wake up his ass anytime during the night to understand how the fuck you get in her room, or mostly his room. This is where, Akano kind of smiles with this, like, evilish, kind of saintful smile and saying, oh, you don't remember? Well, we did have that little party drink, and I did feed you some drinks, and then you passed out after one drink. This is where, Issei said, hell no, I remember just going to nap. I remember everything what I did last night. Literally, we didn't even have a drink. I just went back upstairs to go to my room, which I am in my fucking apartment room. I don't remember ever inviting you here. This is where, Issei kind of said logically. And for your fucking question, for making me drink alcohol, Issei said, I can take 20 beer bottles and I won't be drunk still then. This is where, Akano says, this is where, she is just shocked to believe that Issei can literally drink that much without being drunk, so yeah. This is where, she then says, I gave you the most powerful stuff. If we're talking about vodka, I can literally take like 4 bottles and I won't be drunk. Maybe a little bit, but not much. This is where, oh, Akano says, fine. Fine. I just sneaked into your room. This is where, well, Issei said, now, I can understand why my shirt's off because it usually gets warm in my room, so, yeah. But why don't you have clothes? Literally, she has zero clothes. This is where, well, Rias is right now having tint of blush and red and just looking away. Mostly not from the fact that Dabi has no shirt. Well, mostly that's one thing. But Akano is sleeping without clothes, and she knows that's kind of the cause of her fault because she does the same. This is where, well, Akano says, well, I can't really sleep, well, what's it called, with clothes. It gets uncomfortable. Besides, someone teaches me that when I've been with her for a while. She kind of looks at Rias, and Rias kind of tests a blush and looks away. That's where, oh. Issei sighs and says, oh. Wait, this is where, well, Issei looks under her sheets and realizes his pants are still there, and yes, he still has shorts. Well, mostly, what's it called, his underwear, but yeah. This is where, well, Issei sweat drops, like he like say, whew, dodge a bullet there. This is where Akano kind of giggles a little bit, just saying, wow, you would have got angry or sad if I kind of, gave you, this is where, well, Issei says, okay, we're not doing that until I get comfortable enough, or probably. I don't know how it works. Besides, we are dating, I guess. This is where Akano says, oh, so you don't deny that? Well, we clearly kind of said it to everyone else. This is where Issei is kind of bluntly like that, but yeah. This is where, well, Akano says, I guess you're right. This is where Akano says, so Rias, what do you want? This is where, well, Akano's clothes appear after a while because she just snapped her fingers and a magic circle around her appears, but yeah. Making her have her kind of school uniform. This is where Rias says, yes, what's it called? I came to tell you to kind of help me out in a little bit of problems. Okay, this is where Akano decides to go with Rias. And this is where, well, Akano says, Issei, don't be late to school, okay? This is where, well, Issei says, I'm going back to sleep, okay? You're not stopping me. This is where Akano says, if you don't wake up, I will use lightning. This is where Issei says, then I'll have to use my blue flames to, well, destroy, what's it called, any of your lightning from hurting me. This is where Akano says, Ara. So you will hurt me? You will burn me? This is where, well, Issei says, no, but I'll burn those clothes if you want me to do. This is where, well, Rias says, okay, both of you stop. Stop with this whole sexual talk. This is where, well, both Issei and Akano kind of looks away, but yeah. This is where they had a little tint of pink, but yeah. This is where, well, Rias sighs and says, okay, just let's go. This is where, well, she activated the magic circle and they just disappear. Issei gets up, and of course, the word, well, he goes to kind of get a white shirt and a black coat out of what's it called, mostly his closet, because, well, Akano isn't really going him to go to school, so he has time to kill, because clearly it's 6 in the morning. Yeah, Issei woke up that early because Rias kind of woke him up. This is where, well, he's not going back to sleep, so of course he would just go out walking for a little bit, but yeah. This is where, well, Issei is just like caring less about like things. This is where, well, he's just walking, well, what's it called? This is where, well, Issei is just walking around his, what's it called, like, from the apartment and around the town, just walking around. He was about to get to, what's it called, the park, until he heard someone just scream. And it didn't sound like a girl, it sounded like a guy mixed with a girl scream. So, of course, he was confused, but he walks towards an alleyway. And, of course, what he sees is this, like, a girl with black, long hair all the way down to her knees. And, of course, well, she has this palish white skin and onyx eyes. This is where, well, she has what's it called, the uniform of what's it called, the school, mostly Ikuo Academy. And this is where, well, she is having blood at her, like, fingertips, mostly, yeah, fingertips. Like, blood all around her kind of fingertips, not near her hand, mostly her fingertips, and both hands. And this is where, well, there's multiple, like, people around her, like, mostly guys, kind of, like, peers, or even, like, what's it called, like, slashed at. And, of course, you're kind of bleeding. And this is where, well, Issei kind of sees this. He's walking through the alleyway without a care in the world. If she tries to attack him, he's going to easily be able to kind of, well, whatever. kind of easy block her, kind of attack her back. But yeah, this is where, well, she's right now standing over this guy that has like piercing on his noses, piercing on his ears. This guy looks like a massive douchebag because he has yellow hair. Not really, but he just looks, he has that kind of face of being a massive douchebag. And this is where, well, she's saying pathetic scumbag. This is where, well, a girl behind her says, thank you. This is where the girl Bernie has clothes. This is where Issei is seeing this. He's like confused. What the hell? This is where they both kind of see Issei walking towards them. And this is where the girl with kind of blackish and palish hair, well, mostly blackish hair and palish, what's it called? Not palish eyes. Palish skin kind of looks at Issei and says, who are you? Are you with these assholes? This is where Issei says nothing. He just keeps walking very calmly, like he has both of his hands in his coat. This is where, well, she gets ready to attack him. But this is where, well, they hear screaming and yelling. This is where when they turn around, mostly not from Issei, mostly when the girl kind of turns around, she sees multiple people, like multiple guys just running towards them. This is where the girl gets scared, mostly the girl that was down. And of course she tries to get up, but this is where, well, she can't really move. And this is where the girl says, damn it, you bastards. This is where multiple of those guys really have weapons. But this is where, well, she then turns around to see where Issei's at. But this is where Issei is walking past him. This is where, well, Issei puts, well, one of his hands out. And this is where, well, he then chuckles with this like evil, sinister smile. This is where, well, she's confused until his hand combusted with blue flames. This is where, well, Issei says, cremation burn. He sent his hand straight in front of him, and all of them just ignited into blue flames, like this huge blue flame wall smashed upon almost all of these people, killing them in an instant, burning them to, burning them straight to ash. This is where, well, Issei, after him thinking that's a good time to probably let go of the blue flames, he lets go of it, so of course it won't keep, like, mostly a blue flame wall burns everything. Of course, after him just stopping the attack, pretty much through the whole alleyway of the opposite side that he came from, pretty much all of it is just black, like black ash. The guys are mostly just all turned to like this dark, like burned skin. Of course, where, well, like half of them already have like 3rd-degree burns, 4th-degree burns, and 5th-degree burns when they were like the most closest ones. They got like 5th-degree burns. Second closest to them was kind of 4th degree, and the further they were from the blue flames were kind of 3rd degree, but they're all hurt really bad. This is where, well, their clothes is also kind of burned up, but yeah. This is where, well, blue flames are still lingering around the, what's it called, alleyway, and mostly on top of those people. This is where, well, Issei then, right now, kind of like shakes his hand, mostly what's it called, like, waves his hand up in the air, kind of like getting rid of the blue flames. But he really doesn't need to do that. He just thinks it's kind of cool and all them other things. Because his hand is kind of smoking, but pretty much his flesh isn't burning, thanks to his heat resistance towards the blue flames. He turns around, and this is where the girl, mostly the girl who apparently had that many clothes, right now passes out from the shockwave of the heat, but at the same time pass out and start sleeping because the heat was warm enough to kind of make her pass out, but it was just scary. There were screams and other things. This is where, well, Issei said, huh, she passed out. This is where when he turns to see the girl with the cool uniform, this girl kind of starts having heart in her eyes. This is where, well, Issei says, huh, what? This is where, well, Issei snap his hands, or mostly snap his fingers right in front of her just to see if she's like awake or anything. But he can clearly see those hearts, and this is where he's confused. This is where he thinks, she must be like Akano, crazy and psychotic half the time. This is where, well, he's over here just snapping his finger, saying, hello, is anyone awake? This is where his hands was grabbed by her and says, that was amazing. She starts kind of having like a little bit of drool off her mouth, kind of fall down. And this is where, well, Issei says, huh, what's your name? This is where, well, he tries to remove his hand, but didn't really care that much. This is where she says, oh, my name is, well, this is where, well, she says, my name is Amu Karukyu. This is where, well, this is where she then lets go of Issei's hands after a while, after noticing what she's doing. And this is where, well, Issei says, that's actually quite cute name. This is where, well, her face becomes a little bit tinted pink. This is where, well, he then says, my name is Issei Hiro. Or you can call me Dabi. It doesn't matter. This is where, well, she then says, oh, okay. Kyoto. This is where Issei says, just call me Dabi, it's fine. This is where, well, she nodded. This is where, well, she then asked, why did you help me? This is where, well, Issei said, what do you mean help you? I did it for my own amusement. I burned them to ash because it was funny to me. This is where he grins with a sinister smile. And she starts falling more for Issei. This is where, well, she then said, oh, this is where, well, Issei said, but still, what's with that girl over there? This is where he points to the girl who barely has clothes. Amaru kind of says that pretty much she was kind of attacked and almost harassed if it wasn't for her to stop these scumbags from taking advantage. Issei said, I see. That's quite interesting. Well, we should probably take her to the hospital or something. This is where Amaru does. No, this is where, well, she was about to grab the girl until Issei literally just picked her up pretty easily and put her on her back. This is where Issei says, come on. This is where, well, they get to the hospital, but of course it's 6:50. And of course they really haven't opened, even though there's people inside. This is where, well, Issei is really about to just kick the doors open to without a care in the world. But that will probably cause more trouble than anything, more problems than help. But yeah, this is where they wait for 7 until the doors finally open. This is where, well, the girl is starting to wake up just confusedly and where they're at. Mostly the girl that's on Issei's back. And this is where, well, people in the hospital looked at them confusingly. This is where, well, Issei kind of puts her down near a chair and say this girl needs medical help. This is where, well, the doctors, well, mostly a nurse and doctor do rush over. Does kind of like pick her up and put her on one of those extenders and kind of just take her to one of the rooms. This is where, well, a nurse was actually asking questions toward Issei and even Amaru and kind of asking what happened or blah blah blah. Of course, Issei straight looks like a fucking gangster, like a straight villain out here. And of course, they mostly ask Issei since he's the male, and yeah. This is where, well, Issei says that he just met some group of thugs, easily beat the shit out of them. He says beat the shit out of them because he won't say he accidentally just cremated their asses, even though he wants to. This is where Amaru can see that Issei's pretty much telling the story truthfully, but lying at some parts. This is where, well, she's quite interested in, well, Issei a lot. This is where, well, Issei then says, yeah. This is where, well, when the hospital says, it will be costing this much, and who will you like to ask to kind of pay, or will you pay, or this is where, well, Issei says, I'll pay. This is where Amaru was about to say, I will pay, but this is where Issei said, he said it first. This is where, well, the nurse nodded, and this is where she said this, how much it will cost, and this is where, well, Issei does like pull out his wallet, pulls out a credit card that, well, he stole, and literally kind of just puts it on the thing, remembers the passcode, and just kind of say, yeah, done. This is where, well, she nods and says, thank you for the transmission. Your friend will be out in probably a day later. This is where, well, Issei said, I don't really know her, but I don't know why you keep calling her my friend. Just tell her to go home or something. I don't know where she lives, and I don't really care that much, Issei said. And quite, what's it called? Just quite frankly, he doesn't really care that much about her. This is where the nurse nodded, and yeah. This is where, well, Dabi says, but whatever, I'll be leaving then. This is where, well, the person says, sure. This is where, well, Issei is just getting out of the hospital and of course walking outside, but this is where Maru is kind of following him. This is where Issei says, why are you following me? This is where Maru says, well, school is really going to start later, so it starts like at 8 o'clock, so I don't really want to be there too early. This is where, well, she kind of scratches the back of her head. This is where, well, Issei says, what school do you go to? This is where she said, oh, Kubo Academy. What school do you go to? Same school, I just don't wear the uniform because I'm not that crazy enough to just go wear it. And I, well, actually burned him. He said that quietly, but yeah. This is where she managed to hear it, but yeah. This is where she said, oh, so you go to the same school. What classroom are you in? This is where, well, Issei said, why? What classroom are you in? This is where, well, she says, well, it's kind of my first day, so, I don't really know. This is where, well, Issei sweat drops and says, okay, what school do you came from? Well, it was mostly I should say, a school full of, I guess, a lot of rules. This is where, well, Misa says, Kish, that sucks. And was it mostly private or was it public? Private. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, okay. This is where, well, she says, aren't you gonna ask any more questions about who I am? Am I, how should I say, psycho? This is where, well, Issei finished. This is where she said, yeah, I don't really care. This is where, well, she says, wow, you don't really care if I would try to kill you? Try then. This is where Issei kind of chuckles. This is where, well, she kind of glares at him a little bit, but then just keeps falling for him. Her eyes turn hard for a little bit. This is where she then turns her back. This is where, well, she says, so if I stab you right now, you wouldn't, like, cry out or get angry? Do it then. This is where, well, she swings her kind of, well, she then sends a piercing motion straight towards Issei's back. Well, this is where Issei grabbed her hand, flipped her over, but this is where she managed to land down on her feet, and this is where she tried to pierce him in his, like, face. Issei then grabs the other hand with his right hand, and then grabs the left hand, because he's still holding on with the left hand with his own left hand, but yeah. This is where, well, she kind of sighs and says, you're actually pretty skilled. This is where, well, Issei thought it would be kind of teasing because he remembers Akano kind of always getting close to his face. And this is where Issei kind of puts her really close to his face. This is where, well, Issei looked like he was about to, like, kiss her. And this is where she widened her eyes. And this is where Issei then stopped really close to her. Just kind of breathed in her neck. And this is where she then becomes tinted pink. This is where she said, what are you doing? This is where Issei said, I thought it would be funny like that. Just to tease you a little bit. She then looks away from him, but yeah. This is where Issei then lets go of both of her hands and starts walking away, saying, see ya, I'm gonna have to get to my house and, well, change clothing. Such a bother. Well, whatever, bye. This is where Issei walks away from her, and this is where she's right now kind of pinkish. She says, he's amazing. This is where she said very quietly, and she says, he's going to be mine. She says it with such a psychotic kind of grin. This is where, well, mostly a psychotic yandere grin. This is where, well, she smiles and then just goes and walks away. This is where she's blushing and having hearts in her eyes, but yeah. She then goes home, but yeah, to change because she does have blood on her, clothing, but yeah. We go into Issei getting home and changing out of his, well, mostly casual clothing. Or you can call it a fucking villain clothing because this man be looking straight up like Dabi most of the time. This is where, well, Issei then puts mostly his clothing down. He does kind of like put it in the washer. Goes to get his own kind of like uniform. This is where, well, he mostly got his uniform kind of customized. So of course, mostly it kind of is similar to his original clothing. Mostly he has a black blazer instead of wearing like a red t-shirt or whatever, white or anything. He's wearing a tealish blue t-shirt, but yeah. This is where, well, black, black pants, of course, and, well, kind of like these black Air Force shoes. He's pretty much a menace to society right now. No, I'm just kidding. But for real, this is where, well, Issei then kind of gets towards mostly, he did kind of wash up because he does smell like, well, burning ash, so yeah. So, of course, this is where, well, he gets ready for school, and yeah. Because he knows Hakuno will be very sadistic and wondering where he will be at. And sometimes angry. But yeah, mostly sadistic and angry. This is where, well, Issei, he does wash up, does put on his clothes, does go to the laundry to get his like wet clothes, put them in the laundry machine, and like wash them dry or whatever. And this is where he then goes to, the kitchen, make some food for him, mostly like toasted bread. He does sometimes use the stove, but he then realized he can use his flames. But that's a terrible idea because he literally burned the bread pretty easily because his flames are too hot. He tried to minimize his flames, but yeah, they ain't working. So of course, this is where he just uses some of the stove. But yeah. This is where, well, Issei does eat bread and with butter or whatever. This is where, well, he did get like a juice box out. Mostly like a container of juice and just like put it on a cup and drink it, but yeah. This is where Issei said, what to do next? Go to school and of course get bothered by half of the crazy girls that are in there. Well, they're not yandere level, but still, not yandere level like what they call Akuno. And then he thinks of Amaru a little bit. Now that I think about it, half the girls in the school are pretty damn are really active most of the time and down bad most of the time. They want any cute guy. If they notice how I look like originally, they would be scaring, well, mostly getting scared and running away and calling me monster or ugly. Well, he then looks at a mirror, and of course he still has some, well, what's called not really burnt flesh on his face, but of course he says, really, almost all the flesh burnt is pretty much gone, except for my legs. I still gotta ask Ozzy to heal, but other than that, mostly everything that's pretty visible to be seen, well, is heal. What to do next? After the healment, of course, my blue flames don't hurt me no more, but activating to the next level of purple flames, it will hurt extremely bad. Maybe I should train on that. As it does heal, and of course, it seems to be actually working with the burnt flesh ones. But yeah, does it work? Well, he looks at his hand, and it's still kind of burnt a little bit, but yeah. But he then says, well, she does have a maximum of how to heal. At least I'm helping her healing burn injuries, I guess. This is where he thinks about it, but yeah. This is where he says, maybe I should ask her later. This is where, well, he hears what's called a thing in the, what's it called, laundry room, and decides to pick his clothes out of the, what's it called, heater, well, not heater room, mostly the, laundry, what's it called, the, dryer, and of course puts his clothes back to where it belongs, and yeah. This is where, well, he then says, well, time to go to school. It is right now 7:50, and of course he literally can get to school like 8 or something. But this is where, well, not 7:50, it's 8 o'clock right now, and this is where Issei is getting out of his apartment, locking up, and this is where he's going to the school. This is where, well, he doesn't really have a book bag. Well, he does, and this is where he's getting to school, but yeah. This is where, well, Issei is getting towards the school, and just like looking around. This is where, well, he gets to the school and realizes, yeah, there's too many people. You know, I should just wait on the roof. So he literally just sits on the roof waiting. This is where, well, he hears some, what's it called, laughing and giggling. And this is where, well, he kind of just looks towards where that laughing and giggling is at. It's mostly, what's it called, someone looked to be kind of giggling at her phone and kind of laughing. And this is where she kind of has this tint of like blushing in it, and her eyes are kind of red a little bit. But this is where, well, Issei kind of just pokes her in the mostly cheek and says, yo. This is where she went her eyes, and this is where she then turns around trying to slap Issei. Issei grabbed her hand, and this is where what he kind of meets is a girl with kind of blondish hair, mostly having 2 ponytails. Now, of course, her blonde hair is what's it called, palish, but kind of pinkish at the same time, blondish hair. This is where, well, she's wearing the school uniform of what's it called, Kuo, and of course her eyes were, well, turning blue, palish blue. This is where, well, Issei said, yo, what have you been doing? This is where he looks at the phone and sees literally like someone getting burned to like cremation blue flames. This is where, well, he sees the phone is on like, well, YouTube and other stuff. And this is where, well, he clearly can see what's it called, this girl like hearing what's it called, something in her ears, which he kind of like gets it out of her ears and decides to put it in one of his ears. Well, one of his ears. And this is where she's very confused in who this person is. Literally, her hand was caught pretty easily, even though that's quite impossible because she's swinging so fast, but he reacted still. And this is where, well, he's hearing what it is, and pretty much he then plays it back. It's pretty much a group of thugs, like, laughing, chuckling, and doing whatever at what's it called, convenience store, and then a couple of seconds later, literally them talking smack towards like this person with black hair, black coat, his what's it called features still having burnt skin and other things. And this is where, well, his eyes are kind of tealish blue. This is where he chuckles and says, what quite pathetic weakness like you are doing here. This is where they say, huh, who are you? This is where, well, the video is kind of playing other things. This is where, well, the person says, me? Who am I? I'm basically your despair and fear at the same time. Now die! Both of his hands combusted with blue flames and igniting them. All of the people that were in front of him, just destroying them. This gas station did explode, like multiple gas pumps did explode. And of course the person was chuckling. This is where the camera cuts off, but yeah. This is where, well, Issei said, oh, Fuck, I forgot I did that like a couple of months ago. This is where he then thinks in his head, ah shit, I forgot I did that. I didn't expect someone to easily catch me on footage. Huh. This is where, well, the girl is quite shocked to see, well, Issei kind of listened to the video and watched it pretty easily without any discomfort or even disgust. And of course, there was a lot of screams, like pretty detailed screams and people blood showing and other things, and Issei didn't even care. This is where, well, their skins were kind of burnt to ash and the blood was kind of dried up a little bit. Well, mostly all of it, but yeah. This is where, well, she is confused with Issei really not being uncomfortable or anything. This is where, well, he then kind of says, interesting. This is where, well, he takes out the earbud, gives it back to her, and then stands, well, mostly kind of gets up, saying, how the fuck did someone manage to record me without me noticing them and could have cremated their ass? Seriously, I don't even want to be kind of publicly known. Well, maybe if I want to be the villain. This is where, well, he then says, no. Then school life would be ruined. Probably. Actually, might be even better. This is where he thinks in his head. This is where the girl is right now looking at him with these eyes of, who the fuck are you? First of all, who the fuck are you? Second of all, how aren't you discomfort or just fearing in the video, or how was it called, this terrified look, and why aren't you walking away or running away from me, or just like in general just confused with Issei? But yeah, Issei kind of just, well, looks down and sees the girl, and this is where the girl kind of eyes are just confused, very confused with Issei. She also seems to have like this stuffed bear like right next to her. And this is where, well, the bear is like in two sides. The white side is kind of happy and cheerful like a normal bear, but on the other side has a reddish eye with this like evilish smile. But yeah, this is where, well, he then kind of like pokes the plushie and says, interesting plushie thing you have there. This is where, well, he then gets back up and says, This is where he then looks at the phone, kind of grabs it a little bit. This is where she kind of says, hey, in a very, well, distrusted way. This is where he kind of looks towards the YouTuber whoever kind of posted this. And it's pretty much just a small YouTuber. This is where he says, such a, if that would be a bigger one, I can easily find who it is. I'm gonna cremate them down to the fucking ground. This is where he looks at the video and sees that it seems to be what's it called, a upload. This is where, well, he says, either YouTube managed to, what's it called, disconnect it or whatever. You know, I'm gonna call it, I won't call it YouTube, I'm gonna call it YouTube. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know what to call it, but yeah, you get the point. Doesn't work, well. Issei says, quite annoying. He then gives her back the phone. Right now, put her, like, right into her hands. And this is where, well, Issei was very confused. Right now, thinking, this is where he goes to the ledge and right now puts his hand into his face. And right now, thinking, whoever the fuck it is, I'm going to literally make them burn in cremation flames. That's where he's right now is just like moving, what's it called, his hand towards his temple, and right now thinking, saying, this is such a drag. Whoever it is, I should definitely find them and kill them. This is where, well, the girl seems very confused until she kind of like stood next to him. Right now, well, kind of standing next to him, and says, hey, this is where she said it very uncomfortably, but at the same time just getting down to the point. This is what, well, Issei turns and says, what? This is where she says, you watch all that video, you aren't discomfort or sick or anything. Why is that? Issei said, you think I haven't seen blood and gore or any of that shit? Literally, I could watch, what's it called, multiple movies without fearing for my goddamn life. I don't care if there's a goddamn psychopath on the loose while I'm watching movies of like Friday the 13th or something. This is where, well, she kind of gets interested in the fact that Issei isn't afraid from like psychotic movies or anything like that. This is where she says, oh, interesting. But you know, that wasn't really fake. No, I know it's real. This is where, well, she says, if you knew it was real, then why aren't you discuss it or anything? Like I said, if a psychopath shows up to my house and daring to try to kill me, he better have insurance for his fucking life, because I'm going to kill him for pissing me off. This is what, well, Issei said such coldly and didn't give a shit. Like, it sounded like he was talking about the fucking weather. That's how easily comfortable he is with this topic. He doesn't care. This is where she says, oh, interesting. This is where she says, this is where she isn't really alone with anyone. This is where she was feeling what's it called, happiness with the whole video and other things. And that's one of her favorite videos. And this is where she said, if it makes it feel any better, I have multiple playlists, or mostly a playlist of all the videos of the person being captured. This is where, well, Issei said, wait, what? He then kind of asked her to kind of get the playlist. And this is where, well, she goes to a playlist. And there's like about like 50 videos of him, well, different times of him literally kind of burning people to ash. Or it's different videos, well, not, it's 55 in total for him, but there's other videos of people like committing massacre, genocide, or anything. This is where he says, 55 videos, and whoever the fuck this person is uploading this shit, I'm gonna kill them. He thinks in his head. This is where, well, he says, quite interesting. Well, we have time before my school opens. He looks towards the school gate, and if, of course it's open, but of course it's closed. It's like 9:10, but of course he has time. So of course it's where, the girl notices and says, "Oh right, sure." This is where she starts playing the videos, and of course this is where she gives one of her earbuds towards Issei, and literally they sit down and just watch. This is where, well, she's not very uncomfortable with Issei. It's just seeing that another fellow psychopath is kind of like in the videos, but yeah. This is where, well, they watch the videos, and clearly, like, half of the videos are him either kind of laughing, killing people, either what's called normal thugs, temple people that just piss him off. Actually, even one video that she thought it was, well, it should have been fake because they said in the comments multiple fake, but it looked like a battle between a fallen angel and Issei. Yes, Issei did win against a fallen angel. Now, it wasn't a fallen angel from a cool academy. It looked to be a different place, but this is where, well, not cool academy, mostly cool town, but this is where, well, Issei was literally burning them straight easily down with ash. This is where, well, not ash, mostly burning them down pretty easily. This is where, in one of the videos, they actually mentioned to see him, like, cast an ice, well, mostly an ice spirit that he made, and literally toss it at someone's head. That's where the person was just chuckling. Mostly, it was Issei entirely, but yeah. This is where the girl, she keeps watching the videos, and of course, when she looks up to see Issei to see if he has any discomfort or anything, his eyes are just seeing this with this pretty much evilish grin that he's just cracking up a little bit. Because he remembers some of the videos, or not some of the videos, remember some of the memories that he kind of did just to be a fucking prick half the times. But of course, this is where he's chuckling a little bit. This is where she sees that Issei's actually kind of amusing, kind of amusing himself with the videos. This is where, well, she doesn't know why, but she's feeling differently between Issei and normally any other guy. This is where, well, she just keeps looking at the videos, but every time she sees Issei with this like small evilish grin, she kind of, for some reason, feels differently in her stomach. This is where, well, she then says, this is quite interesting. Why am I getting this weird feeling? Why do I feel like it's something that my mother has told me before about stuff? No, I shouldn't be thinking of that. This is where, well, she's right now trying to, well, not think of that. And of course keeps watching the videos. This is where, when they keep watching the videos, they realize it's like 9:10, and of course, or not, yeah, it's 9:10, and this is where the gate literally closed. And this is where, well, they hear the gate kind of close, and when they turn to around, they see the gate already closed. This is where they say, fuck. They both said it in their mindscape, and this is where he says, oh, well, fucking just jump over that shit. This is where, well, she sighs and says, oops, sorry about making you miss school or any of that. He says, nah, I can just jump over that shit, I don't really care. This is where, well, she says, you're just gonna jump over it? This is where Issei says, yep. This is where, well, Issei said, so what's your name? This is where, well, she kind of says, my name is Junko. Junko, what's it called? She says her name is Junko Aneshima, and of course, this is where, well, Issei says, interesting. The name is Issei Hyodo. This is where, well, Junko nodded. This is where, well, Issei said, so is it your first day to come here or what? This is where they're walking to the school, and of course the school gate is literally closed. This is where, well, she says, kinda, I just got here for a while, I kinda moved here. Mostly to Kuo town, but yeah. Issei said, okay. This is where she says, so is this your first day? No, it's been like a couple of days, 10 days in total. First day I wanted to ditch, but I couldn't. So yeah, this is where, well, Junko kind of giggles, but yeah. This is where, well, they see the door close. Of course, closed with what's it called? Like, it's kind of locked with a kind of like door lock and other things. Well, not a door lock, like a little like lock. And this is where, well, someone behind them, well, mostly says, oh, hey, Issei. This is where, well, or Dabi mostly, she said. And this is where, well, when he says, and what's it called, Junko turn around, they see a girl with black long hair, of course, palish white skin, and onyx eyes. This is where Issei says, oh, Amaru, you're here. What, did you just ditch and didn't care that much about going to school? She said, no, it took me a while to get a lot of things out of my hair for a second. But yeah, mostly blood and other things. This is where, well, when she said blood, Issei didn't really care that much, and neither did Junko. This is where Junko actually had, what's it called, smile on her face, like thinking of blood and other things, but yeah. This is where, well, Amaru says, who is her? Another new student, just like you're another new student. Huh, the gates are closed. This is where Issei literally just grabbed the lock and started melting it with his hands. This is where, well, both Amaru and Junko got surprised looks. This is where Issei says combustion blue flame. This is where he easily just destroyed the lock, throwing it down, and of course where he pushes the gate and says, well, we can enter now. This is where, well, both of them are kind of shocked. Now, of course, this is where, well, they say, what the? Well, most Amaru already knows that he can use blue flames, and Junko says, wait. This is where she starts talking to Issei and says, you're Dabi? You're the guy that we basically watched the videos. Why is your skin not burnt? Issei says, oh, I gotta heal after a while. You can say, a small devil decided to help me. This is where he grins a little bit. This is where, well, they kind of looks at him, kind of confused, but yeah. This is where Issei says, don't worry. Most of the burnt skin was just there because of my idiotic way to, well, look badass. Kinda. Now that I think about it, I kind of miss it also. But not the point. This is what Issei said. This is where, well, Junko nodded, and even Amaru, but yeah. This is where both of them looking at each other, and right now kind of glaring at each other for some reason. Because for some reason, Amaru doesn't really like Junko, and Junko doesn't like Amaru. Well, they have this weird, interesting look towards Issei every time they look at him. This is where, well, Issei says, whatever, we should probably get to the president office or whatever, the freaking council office. This is where they kind of nod, and basically he just takes him towards the office, and this is where they get the classrooms, and of course they're third years also. This is where, well, they're basically in the same kind of classroom as Issei. Issei says, interesting, quite interesting, quite lucky also. Whatever, this is where, well, they start walking along with him, and this is where, well, mostly, what's it called, a couple of girls who are, what's it called, well, from the same kind of school and other things, kind of rush up to Issei because they see Issei, and they say, Issei! This is where they try to rush at him. This is where Issei says, gah, such annoying girls. This is where both Amaru and Junko says, what are you two, well, what are you all five want? They said, right now in front of Issei. This is where the girls who are right now in this school says, huh? Who the hell are you whores? And why are you with Issei-kun? This is where, well, they get angry and kind of said, you know what? He's our Issei-kun. So either you piss off or die. They said it quite coldly. Issei said, I guess my correction of them both, or mostly Amaru being a yandere, and Junko seems to be also a yandere, might be correct. That's where he grinned to himself, kind of liking the idea of having two yanderes. This is where, well, he doesn't really mind them. He actually can care less. This is where, well, the girls get angry and try to attack Junko or Amaru, and they literally kick the shit out of the 5 different girls pretty easily. This is where, well, Junko seems to be a martial artist, and this is where, well, Amaru was also very skilled in martial arts, but also had this, well, interesting kind of ability that's called auto counter, basically, or auto counter strike, meaning that she's able to counteract anyone's attack pretty easily in auto, without her kind of doing it. Well, it's mostly her doing it in instant, but yeah. Issei was kind of pretty interesting with her kind of skills, and the girls are right now on the ground, kind of hurt already. Most of the 5 girls, so this is where Issei kind of grins. Well, he kind of grins, and this is where he puts both his hands around what's it called, Junko, and what's it called, Amaru's kind of like, mostly mostly all over their shoulders. And this is where he says, well, come on, girls. We should probably get this class then. This is where both of them are blushing. Issei grins a little bit and says, you two are pretty skilled and beautiful at the same time. He said it at the same time, just a little bit of teasing he wanted to do. This is where both of their faces are kind of red and kind of having hearts in their eyes. This is where, well, they said, okay, Issei-senpai. This is where, well, Issei said, don't call me that. Actually, you two could call me that if you want to. This is where Issei grins a little bit, yeah. This is where half the girls are kind of, almost these are 5 girls, are on the ground and kind of are bleeding a little bit. This is where, well, Issei is grinning at this, but yeah. We go into the classroom and literally they just get into the classroom and they're sitting together. Issei is sitting next to mostly Akano, but yeah. This is where Akano says, Ara, who are those two and why were you so close with them? She said it very sharply toned, and this is where Issei says, well, they could be your sisters with me. This is where, well, he said they could be your sisters. You know, sisters in love with me then. This is where, well, Akano says, what are you talking about? Are you saying that you're trying to build a harem? Issei says, a harem full of saints and yandere, maybe. This is where, well, Akano looks at him very intently and says, actually, that's not a bad idea. There's skill in fighting, then yeah. I actually will like that. And if they're like me, then I'll like that even more. She said it very intently. This is where Issei said, good, then you're gonna have to talk to them. Their skills in fighting are pretty decent. For being, I guess, humans, you can say. This is where, well, Akano says, Ara, that's pretty interesting. So why were you late at school? This is where she had now, her tone changes from a friendly chat with Issei to a very sharp and cold tone. Issei says, oh, I was helping them because they're kind of new to the school. He kind of chuckles a little bit. This is where, well, Akano says, okay, fine. I will take the word. But next time that you're late, I'm gonna make sure I electricity you so much every day in the morning. That's where Issei said, oh, would you do that to me? Huh? Then it won't be too bad if I actually burn your clothes in, well, in front of everyone. This is where, well, Akano glares at him, and this is where Issei kind of grins at her. What? You wouldn't like that? This is where Issei said very quietly and kind of huskily and kind of just like breathes into her neck, and this is where she kind of blushes and says, stop that. This is where, well, Issei just kind of grins at her, and just this is where no one else is looking at them, but mostly what's it called, Junko, and what's it called, Amaru. But this is where, well, after class is where Amaru and Junko kind of got near him, and also Akano, and says, who the hell is her? This is where they kind of question Akano. Akano says, Ara. She kind of grins with this evilish smile and says, so you two are my sisters. This is where, well, they kind of look at her confusedly. Well, this is where, well, they got a full explainment from what's it called, Akano, and this is where they kind of have a tint of red in their faces. This is where, well, Akano says, so do you agree with? This is where, well, they kind of nod. This is where, well, they says, as sisters for, well, Issei-kun, we will kill anyone, mostly Junko said. We'll kill them and make them feel despair, daring to try to get anywhere near, this is what Akano says, anywhere near Issei-kun. This is where they all grin, and Issei is hearing this from the other side of, what's it called? Well, see, he's near the corner of a wall and hearing this. That's where he grinned to himself and said, it might not be bad to be dating Yanderes. They're really cute to me. And pretty, how should I say, interesting. That's where he licks his lips and just walks away. This is where, well, we go into Issei being at, well, mostly a gym. Yeah, he's basically at gym. He's right now in a gym, kind of like working out. Pretty much it's just a score gym. And of course, a bunch of guys are kind of just like sighing and kind of breathing out. And this is where Issei's like still in his like 20 lap of running. He is really good at, he has lots of stamina. He has lots of muscles, and yeah. This is where, well, not lots of muscles. He's kind of thin, but muscular at the same time. And Issei says, this is nothing. Everyone's already dead. This is where, well, like 5 guys managed to do like 5 laps, and a bunch of other people just passed out throughout the whole doing the laps. But yeah, mostly like 1 lap or 2 laps. That's where Issei says their stamina really sucks. Whatever. Issei stops running when he sees a bunch of girls kind of looking at him with these eyes of hearts, and that's where Issei says, She probably asked him to get rid of those girls. Until mostly, what's it called? The girls kind of all kind of got knocked out. None of the guys noticed this, but this is where Issei kind of noticed another girl kind of like running. And mostly is kind of knocking out some of the girls. Or not running, mostly just walks past the girls. And that's where Issei's eyes landed on her. She has blue, what's it called? Bluish hair, bluish eyes, and palish skin. Issei says, interesting. She's cute. At least she actually did give me a what's it called. Well, give me a help with those fucking girls. Maybe I should thank her. This is where when the gym was over, Issei kind of got towards where the girl was at. And she seems to just be looking into mostly just like the sky, thinking whatever. This is where, well, Issei landed next to her and says, yo. This is where, well, he kind of mostly like jumped over a fence and kind of just landed next to her. This is where, well, the girl says, huh, you must be Issei-kun. Or what it's called, yeah, Issei. Issei-san, or, yeah. This is where Issei says, I wouldn't like you calling me kun. So, what's your name? This is where, well, the girl says, Estef. This is where Issei says, oh, Estef-chan. So, thank you for kind of getting rid of those girls from actually looking at me. I got really uncomfortable with them. This is where Estef says, okay. This is where, well, Issei said, so, Estef, why you did it anyway in the first place? Estef says, because those girls should have been working out, not staring at guys. Or mostly you. This is where, well, Issei says, I guess you can say that. So, you seem pretty skilled in knocking them out. Mostly any girl would kind of just punch them or kind of knock them out, grab their hair or whatever. This is where, well, Estef says, I'm not any girl, okay? This is where, well, Issei says, I know. But also, you're a pretty cute one. This is where, well, this is where Estef's face becomes a little red when she looks at Issei with her bluish eyes. Issei opens his eyes and just grins a little bit at her. This is where, well, she says, huh, why the hell would you call me that? There's no way in hell I am cute to you. This is where, well, she stutters a little bit. This is where Issei says, oh, well, you are. You're quite interesting. Huh. This is where, well, Estef gets up and says, whatever. This is where, well, Estef hears a bunch of girls running towards Issei. And mostly her, and this is where mostly the girls are angry but happy at the same time. Issei says, so many girls. This is where Issei's hand becomes cremated with blue flames and doesn't care if Estef sees him. This is where Estef notices him and then just kind of says, ice style. Ice pillar wall. This is where, well, she then kind of like slams the ground with her hand, and this is where all the girls literally got frozen. Right now frozen in just mid-air. Well, mostly they're all in ice. This is where, well, Issei says, interesting, ice ability. Issei puts his hand back to his like back, mostly back head, and says, that's quite cool. I guess you can say that's quite cool to see you have ice. She says, stop with the puns. I saw you actually almost ignite your hands with blue flames. Why that? I don't really like girls like those. Fangirls. Nah, no thanks. But your ice is quite amazing. And quite beautiful at the same time. That's where, well, Estef says, and you must be Dabi, the cremation freak to literally burn people for pissing them off, or literally kill them out of nowhere. He says, oh, so you know about me. Of course. Anyone with a brain trying to figure out who actually uses those cremation flames, well, yeah, they can see that it's you. Who else uses blue flames? He says, it's quite interesting you know about me a little bit. Well, I mean, it is on YouTube, or mostly YouTube. He says, fuck, I'm gonna find that bastard and kill them. He said very loud, but quiet enough for only Estef to hear. Estef chuckles and says, well, so you really don't like people looking and you getting population notice. Well, it's cool to notice that people would fear me, but I don't really like getting popular with most of the girls. That's where Estef says, then why are you kind of just talking to me without just you attacking me also? Because you're not interested in me. You don't have hearts in your eyes. Well, mostly not yet. This is where, well, Estef says, Kuh. And why should I care about you? Having hearts having hearts for you? Because I like you a lot. You're quite talented and amazing. And quite cute. and also pretty hot, the really pale skin. That's where she kind of blushes and says, whatever. She starts walking away, and that's where Issei says, hey, He then says, hey, Estef. That's where Estef turns around and says, what? That's where Issei says, would you like to go out? This is where, well, her face becomes all red and says, what? I'm just kidding, but really, would you like to kind of go out with me? This is where Issei gets close to her, and this is where her face is all red and says, well, She's thinking in her head, well, he isn't that bad looking. He's actually quite talented in his fighting skills. And also, from those videos, he is Dabi. Oh, this is where she's thinking in her head, and this is where she's all red. This is where Issei says, hello? This is where Issei gets closer. And this is where, well, she snaps out and realizes that Issei was about to kiss her. This is where she actually was about to kiss him back, but this is where Issei stops and says, she isn't trying to kiss me back. Well, I gotta go then. This is where Issei says, hey, you mother. This is where, well, Issei says, what? You were frozen still, so I was going to just walk away. This is where, well, Estef just glares at him. This is where, well, Issei says, well, I should be going. Also, if you really want to go out with me, you're gonna have to talk to the other girls. This is where, well, Estef kind of glares at him and says, what other girls? Don't worry. You can probably see them with me most of the time. See ya. This is where Ice Queen, he said. This is where Estef glares at him and says, whatever. This is where, well, her face is all pinkish, though. She says, I gotta unfreeze the girls there. Or should I? Nah, I don't care. This is where Estef walks away, but yeah. This is where, well, we go into mostly Issei get into the ORC and seeing, well, a couple of people there already. Mostly Amaru, what's it called? Junko, Akuno, and even, well, a surprising one is Estef. This is where, well, Estef is talking to Junko and what's it called, Amaru, but yeah. This is where Issei says, whoa, this is surprising to see the Ice Queen here. This is where Estef glares at him and says, oh, Dabi. This is where, well, Issei says, what an interesting sight. Seeing all the 4 girls I really like being in one spot. That kind of really arouses me. This is where, well, they all blush and say, what? This is where Akuno was about to say ara, and this is where she says, what? This is where, well, she actually stops the whole ara. This is where, well, Ria kind of sees this and kind of hates it. She actually wanted to have Issei for herself, but pretty much Issei seems to be interested in 4 different girls. She sighs, but yeah, Kaneko doesn't really care because Issei seems to not be much of a pervert, mostly kind of liking the girls that he mostly likes. That's where Kaneko still doesn't know what kind of interesting that he likes, but yeah. This is where, well, Kiba on the other hand is really scared of those girls because he kind of did heard them being like kind of similar to Akuno and being a sanus, being crazy, and being almost close to being a yandere. Yeah, no. He will say, yeah, no. This is where Asuya is next to Kiba, but yeah. Or mostly next to Koneko, but yeah. This is where, well, they say, what are you talking about? They mostly call him Issei-kun. Even when Estef changes from Dabi to Issei-kun. Issei says, whoa, you're all calling me kun. So, why are you all doing that? This is where, well, they kind of blush and say, nothing. This is where, oh, Issei grins and says, okay. So, what are we all doing here then? He kind of asks to call Rias. Rias says, well, there's not really much things for you 4 to do. She kind of points at Amaru, Junko, and what's called Estef and even Issei. This is where, well, since you're not really part of my group, this is where, well, I can say, alright, you 3 girls aren't really a part of Devils or anything. This is where Issei's neither. This is where, well, they said that we'd rather stay human sin. This is where, well, Ria sighs because she would have liked him to be with her in what's it called, Barrage, and even ask Issei, but Issei's going to say no. Issei says, yeah, fuck no. This is where, well, Akuno says, I understand all of your, well, not interested in becoming double, so yeah. This is where, well, Ria says, well, Asuya, Kiba, you're still gonna have to do deliveries and other stuff, but yeah. Well, other than that, pretty much there's nothing to really do. Rating games will not start because I'm still too young for it. Issei, huh, that sucks. I would have loved to beat the shit out of the fried chicken again. This is where, well, the three girls are new kind of looks at him confusedly and says, fried chicken? What are you talking about? Koneko says, there was a guy, mostly Koneko explains, there's a guy who's like a phoenix that I mostly call him fried chicken also. This is where, well, they look at Issei and say, you beat the shit out of a phoenix? This is where, well, Amaru kind of says, you beat the shit out of a fried chicken? That's quite interesting. Was he strong? Issei looks at them with this evilish, sinister look, and this is where Akano knows, yeah, that was nothing to him. He literally fucked over Riser pretty easily. Issei says, oh, no, it wasn't. It was absolutely not that fun. Actually, the only fun thing that was there was me torturing the Phoenix bastard. He was such an arrogant prick, Issei said, without a care in the world, like he was talking about the weather. This is where they look at him just shocked. But yeah. Issei says, well, other than that, if this is all that's here in the OH, well, mostly in this place, I'm going back home. Yeah, I'm going back home. I'm pretty tired. This is where, well, Rhea says, yeah, you can go back home then. This is where Issei says, well, bye. This is where the other girl says, yeah, I'd rather just stay here and talk to Akano. They kind of just said. This is where, well, Rhea says, yeah, whatever, do whatever. This is where Rhea kind of walks away. But this is where she makes a magic circle before Akano stopping her and saying, oh, Rias, let me talk to you for a second. This is where Rhea says, yeah, what do you want, Akano? Don't you dare get anywhere near Issei-kun. I know what you are thinking about. You're still trying to get laid. And by doing that, you're trying to get my man about it. This is where, well, Rias glares at her and says, huh? Why do you think I would do something like that? Because I can feel the jealousy that is coming off of you. Every time that Issei talks to all four of us, you seem to get really jealous. So please don't do it. She has this very evilish, psychotic grin on her face, mostly Akano. That's where Rias kind of just scoffs and says, I'm not gonna do anything. Really? Okay. Well, if you want to hear something interesting about this, is where Akano whispers some stuff into her ear, and this is where Ria's face becomes all red. She said, what? You're all going to... No, I'm just kidding. Akano says with this very joking look, but yeah, but still, she then kind of glares at Rias and says, but still, don't go anywhere near him, okay? This is where she walks away and goes back to talking to her friend. Well, her new founding Yanderes sisters, but yeah. This is where, well, we go into Issei, going back home and literally just taking a fucking nap. Until he hears a knocking at his door. Issei goes, opens it, and it's none other than the fallen General Azel. Issei says, nope. Issei closes his door and didn't care too much. He then goes back to sleep. But this is where, well, Azel still knocks at his door and says, come on, brat. Let me talk to you for a second. This is where Issei opens the door and says, what? This is where, well, Issei gets quite annoyed with the fallen general being here. This is where, well, Azel says, oh, come on, brat. Is it really too bad for me just to talk to my favorite human? Issei says, yes, it is. What do you want? Azel sighs and says, fine. I came here to talk. Issei says, okay, then what is that talking? Okay, fine, let me tell you something. Do you remember about the fallen angels and the whole thing I'll tell you about the supernatural? Yeah, I am. Well, I'm here to tell you about, there's two holy, how should I say, exorcists coming towards Kuo town to find 4 Excalibur fragments that got stolen by one of my subordinates. He says, okay, if you know who the hell did it, then go deal it with yourself. This is where, well, as I said, about that, the person that did it is none other than my general, my army general named Kokobo. He did it, and I can't really get involved and show myself to Kuo town because I would start a war with the devils. Since I am a general, I'm a governor general of all angels. So I want you to deal with him. Issei said, oh, for fuck's sake, I'm not even in the 3 great factions. Leave me alone. That's why Issei says, but that's the reason. That's the good reason. You're not in any of the, 3 factions. So literally, you're the perfect person to deal with, Kokobel. Who's Kokobel again? Oh, this is where Elsa says, oh, I forget that you call him Cocoa Bean. Yeah, I mean Cocoa Bean. This is where, Issa says, not that motherfucker. Isn't he a war marno, or whatever the hell he is? Yep. Fine. I'll kick the shit out of him. I'll burn his fucking wings into absolute nothing but ash, and then I'll give it to you like a fucking present. Do you want that? That's where Elsa says, kinda, yeah. This is where Issei sighs and says, oh, whatever. Why can't you get another of your fallen angels to do it? Because, the whole double society that's here, or mostly the rulers of Kowo Town. Issei sighs and says, yeah, I know what to do. Fine, I'll deal with them. What about the two exorcists? The two exorcists that are coming from church are mostly to get the fragments of, what's it called, Excalibur, but yeah. So I shouldn't get in their way. Sure, probably not, maybe, I don't know. This is where, as I say, so I don't really know in who the two exorcists, well, what they look like, but they are mostly, one has orange hair, one has blue hair. So, that should narrow down what they look like. Issei smacks his forehead and says, seriously? Oh, god damn it. This is where Elsa says, oh, come on, it won't be that bad. You can feel the holy energy they erupted from their body, mostly. Yeah. So you want me to counter them and fight them and knock them out so I can easily take out Cocoa Bean. No, that's not what I'm telling you, but Jesus Christ, I know you're gonna do something crazy to literally find Cocoa Bean. In your words, it's Cocoa Bean. Yeah. So is this all you're telling me to do? Yep. Now get the fuck out of my house. This is where, actually, this is an apartment. I said get the fuck out. His hand right now ignited with blue flames. This is where Elsa says, okay, calm down. Well, calm down. Also, before I leave, the white dragon might suddenly show up during your battle. Tell Volley to fuck off. This is where, he throws literally a coffee mug straight to Elsa and tell Volley to fuck off. Because Issei has met Volley and Volley has pissed him off enough to be annoying. This is where, Elsa says, I wish that was so easy. This is where Issei says, if he doesn't fuck off, I will burn him to ash. I don't care if I have to grab him and burn him straight to fucking ash. Elsa says, yeah, I know that you would love to do that to Volley, because Volley likes to just piss you off. But, hey, what's the worst thing that might happen if Volley does attack you? Issei looks at him before shutting the door. Shut the fuck up and let me go to sleep. Elsa sighs and says, fine. Go take your nap, you freaking sleepyhead. Issei said, what do you call me? I'm about to burn you to ash now. This is where Issei opens the door, and this is where Elsa's not running like fucking hell. Issei says, come here, Elsa, I'm about to burn you, you little fry fucking... This is where, Elsa's running, shit. This is where he kind of smashes through the window and literally just have fallen wings and just fly away. Issei says, you motherfucker. Issei goes back to, going to sleep, but yeah. Elsa says, crazy psychopath. Whatever. This is where Elsa thinks in his head, at least thanks for keeping my daughter safe. This is where he kind of said that pretty quietly and then walks away, once he flies away. This is where, Issei kind of just goes to fucking sleep and doesn't care. This is where, he falls back to sleep, but yeah. This is where the next day happens, and Issei's getting towards Kowo Academy, and of course meeting up with the 4 girls that he likes. But yeah, this is where, Rias is right now behind a tree, spying on them. Akano can see this. This is where none of the other girls notices, but even Issei didn't notice this mostly, but yeah. This is where, Akano kind of just sighs, but yeah. This is where, she kind of still looks ahead and talking to Issei and mostly the other girls, but yeah. This is where, for right now, I'm going to leave it off here for part 2 of this What If. So yeah, other than that, bye.